Welcome to Passions Illustrated. Before starting the video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. The metallic sound of the coins spinning on the mahogany table echoed through the office as Marcus Richardson watched them with a mixture of contempt and determination. This ritual, inherited from his father, had always preceded the family's most important decisions, but this time the outcome would be different. You're throwing away the legacy of 3 generations, Marcus. Richard Richardson Sr. shouted, his normally controlled face now contorted with fury. The family patriarch slammed the table, causing the coins to stop abruptly. Think what your mother would say. Marcus adjusted his navy blue tie and stood up calmly, his imposing 6-foot figure standing out against the Manhattan panorama through the 45th floor window Richardson Enterprises occupied, one of the most prestigious addresses in New York, and that office had been the scene of countless decisions that had shaped the family empire. It's exactly because I think of family that I'm doing this, Dad, Marcus replied, his voice firm but controlled. Joshua deserves better than to be a piece in your corporate chess game. His younger brother's name hung in the air like a silent accusation. Joshua, at the age of 25, had been systematically manipulated by the family into taking on the role of surrogate heir. A plan B should Marcus fail in his duties. The discovery of the emails exchanged between his parents and the company's board detailing how they intended to use Joshua's insecurity to keep him under control was the last straw. Ms. Hayes, Richard Sr. called out, addressing the lawyer sitting discreetly in the corner of the room. Please explain to my son the legal implications of what he intends to do. Charlotte Hayes raised her green eyes from the laptop on which she was taking notes. Her presence, there was no coincidence. Marcus had personally chosen her after weeks of research. Of 32, and with an impeccable reputation in corporate law, she was known for her unwavering integrity. Mr. Richardson, she began, adjusting her delicate framed glasses. As an independent lawyer, my role is to ensure that all parties fully understand your decisions. Mr. Marcus is within his legal rights. The tension in the room was palpable. Marcus observed how Charlotte maintained her professional composure, even under her father's intimidating gaze. There was something about the way she carried herself that conveyed a serene strength unlike anything he had known in the corporate environment. Marcus, interjected Patricia Richardson, his mother, who had remained silent until then. Think about the future of the company, the people who depend on us. That's exactly what I'm thinking about, Mom, replied Marcus, walking over to the window. The city stretched out below, millions of lives intertwined in a web of dreams and ambitions. Richardson Enterprises will survive, but not at the expense of my brother's soul. Charlotte began to organize the documents on the table, her movements precise and methodical. If everyone agrees, we can proceed with the transfer of shares and the reorganization of the corporate structure. This is an outrage, exploded Richard Sr., standing up abruptly. I'm going to challenge every line of those documents. Dad, Marcus turned, facing the man he had admired so much all his life. You taught me that integrity was the fundamental pillar of business, that family came first. Those were your words. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia covered her face with her hands, her jewelry sparkling in the late afternoon light coming through the windows. Richard Sr. seemed to have aged 10 years in a matter of minutes. Ms. Hayes, Marcus turned to the lawyer. Could you give us a moment? Charlotte nodded discreetly and stood up, her pencil skirt and high heels echoing softly across the marble floor as she headed for the door. Before she left, her eyes met Marcus briefly, and he sensed something he hadn't expected. Understanding, alone with his parents, Marcus sat down again. Joshua is in his apartment in Boston, probably believing that he's not good enough to be here today. Do you know why? Because you spent the last 5 years undermining his confidence, making him doubt every decision. Patricia sobbed softly, but Marcus continued. He's brilliant. He has a natural gift for innovation that I never had, but you were so busy trying to control him that you didn't realize the damage you were causing. You don't understand, muttered Richard Sr., his voice now tired. Everything we did was to protect the family legacy. No doubt it was to protect your control. Marcus took out his phone and showed a recent photo of Joshua. In the images, his younger brother was smiling, but his eyes carried a shadow of insecurity that broke Marcus' heart. This is the real legacy you're building. The sun was beginning to set over Manhattan, painting the office in golden hues. Marcus stood up again, straightened his suit, and walked to the door. Miss Hayes will finalize the documents. My decision is made. As he left the office, he found Charlotte waiting in the corridor, her laptop tucked under her arm. She watched him with an expression that mixed respect and curiosity. Thank you for your help today, said Marcus, his voice softer now that they were away from their parents' gaze. "Just doing my job, Mr. Richardson," she replied, but there was a slight smile on her lips. "Not everyone would have the courage to do what you're doing." Marcus looked out of the hallway window, gazing at the city that had always been his home. "Sometimes, Ms. Hayes, the price of integrity is higher than we realize, but it's a price worth paying." The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and as they both stepped inside, Marcus couldn't help noticing how the sunset light gave Charlotte's auburn hair an almost ethereal glow. Something told him that this wouldn't be his last meeting with the lawyer who had helped him take the first step towards his release. The cab snaked through the streets of Boston as Marcus watched the fine rain falling on the city. After the confrontation with his parents, he decided that his next stop would be Joshua's apartment. The lights of the Prudential Center reflected in the puddles, creating an urban kaleidoscope that matched his agitated mind. "This is it, sir," the driver announced, pulling up in front of an elegant building in Back Bay. Marcus adjusted his coat and stepped out of the cab, feeling the damp autumn air on his face. The doorman recognized him, immediately nodding respectfully as he opened the door. In the elevator, Marcus checked his phone. 3 missed calls from his mother and a message from Charlotte Hayes. "The documents are ready for review. Can we meet tomorrow at 9 a.m.? His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before answering in the affirmative. There was something about Charlotte's professional objectivity that intrigued him, a quiet strength that seemed perfectly aligned with his own values. Joshua opened the door after the third knock, his brown eyes wide with surprise. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Joshua's apartment was a reflection of his personality, an eclectic mix of cutting-edge technology and carefully restored vintage furniture. Prototypes of half-assembled devices occupied a work table in the corner of the room, silent witnesses to his innate talent for innovation. "We need to talk," Marcus said, following his brother into the living room. "Something happened at the company today." Joshua poured 2 cups of coffee, his hand shaking slightly. "Dad called earlier. He was furious, but he didn't say why. He just kept asking questions about my latest projects." Marcus watched his younger brother, noticing the deep circles under his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. Joshua had always been the more sensitive of the two, carrying the weight of family expectations like an invisible anchor. "I found the emails," Marcus began, his voice soft but firm, "about how they planned to use you as collateral if I didn't follow their script." The silence that followed was heavy. Joshua dropped onto the sofa, his coffee cup forgotten on the coffee table. "So it's true," he muttered, running his hands over his face. "I always felt there was something wrong, but so I made a decision." Marcus continued, taking a seat next to his brother. "I gave up my share of the inheritance." Joshua raised his head sharply, disbelief evident on his face. "You what?" "Marcus, that's billions of dollars." "And what's the value of your freedom, Josh?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. "Your right to follow your own dreams without manipulation." The words hung in the air as Joshua processed the information. Marcus could see the gears turning in his brother's mind, years of doubts and insecurities starting to make sense. "The lawyer handling the case, Charlotte Hayes, suggested that you should also be present at the next meetings," Marcus added, watching his brother's reaction carefully. "You're really doing it," Joshua said, more of a statement than a question. "You're defying Dad in abandoning everything." "No," Marcus smiled slightly. "I'm choosing what really matters." "Do you remember that renewable energy project you developed last year?" Joshua nodded, a glint of interest appearing in his eyes. "Charlotte mentioned that she knows some investors who might be interested, people who value real innovation, not just family names." The mention of Charlotte's name for the second time made Joshua arch an eyebrow. "That lawyer seems to have made a strong impression on you." Marcus felt an unexpected warmth creep up his neck, but kept his composure. "She's competent?" "Competent," Joshua repeated with a knowing smile. "Of course." Distant thunder echoed through the city, and the rain began to fall harder. Marcus stood up and walked over to the window, watching the lights of Boston flicker through the drops of water. "Tomorrow I have a meeting with her at 9 a.m., he said, turning to Josh. "I'd like you to come with me." Joshua was silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the unfinished prototype on his desk. "Do you really think I can do that, go my own way?" "Josh, you've always been the true innovator in the family," Marcus replied with conviction. "Dad and Mom were so busy trying to fit us into their molds that they didn't realize how much they were stifling your potential." Marcus's phone vibrated again, another message from Charlotte with details about the next day's meeting. He noticed his heart racing slightly when he saw her name on the screen, a reaction he preferred not to analyze too deeply at the moment. "Okay," Joshua finally said, a new kind of determination in his voice. "I'll be there tomorrow." When Marcus left his brother's apartment hours later, the rain had stopped, leaving the air with that peculiar clarity that comes after a storm. As he waited for another cab, his mind wandered to the next day's meeting, and he found himself thinking not only of the documents that would need to be reviewed, but also of the green eyes behind the delicate framed glasses that would examine them. The cab arrived, and Marcus gave the driver the address of his hotel. Boston passed by the window like a blur of lights and shadows, and he felt for the first time in a long time that he was on the right track, not just for himself, but for his family, even if his parents couldn't see it yet. Charlotte Hayes' office in downtown Boston was different from what Marcus had expected. Instead of the typical austere corporate environment, the space was welcoming with walls in soft tones and a privileged view of the Charles River. Joshua paced nervously back and forth while Marcus kept his eyes fixed on the door. "Mr. Richardson." Charlotte entered the room at precisely 9 o'clock, carrying a brown leather briefcase. "And you must be Joshua." Marcus watched as his brother instantly straightened up, as if Charlotte's calm presence had a reassuring effect. She was wearing a gray blazer over a white blouse, her brown hair tied up in an elegant bun. "The preliminary documents are ready." She began spreading papers out on the glass table. "But before we go any further, I received an interesting call this morning." Marcus arched an eyebrow. "My father." "Your mother, actually," Charlotte replied, her green eyes meeting his. "She wants to meet you alone." Joshua tensed visibly next to his brother. "This is a trap, Marcus. They always do that, divide and conquer." "Not necessarily." Charlotte intervened, removing her glasses. Mrs. Richardson seemed different, vulnerable. Even Marcus ran his hand over his face, feeling his stubble. The image of his mother, crying in the office, still haunted him. Patricia Richardson had always been the stabilizing force in the family, even when she followed her husband's manipulations. "What's your professional opinion, Ms. Hayes?" Marcus asked, noticing how she seemed to consider every word carefully before speaking. "Legally, nothing would change. The documents I prepared are proof of challenge." She paused, drumming her fingers on the table. "But personally, I think you should hear her out." Silence filled the room as Marcus considered his options. Joshua had approached the window, his silhouette jagged against the blue autumn sky. "There's something else," Charlotte continued, pulling another document from her briefcase. "Those investors I mentioned are interested in Joshua's renewable energy project." "Very interested?" Joshua's face lit up for the first time since they arrived. "Really?" "Anderson and Mitchell Ventures." Charlotte slid a card across the table. "They have an impressive track record with clean tech startups and, most importantly, no connection to Richardson Enterprises." Marcus felt a surge of pride when he saw the genuine enthusiasm on his brother's face. It was as if years of pressure were beginning to dissipate, revealing the bright young man who had always existed under the shadow of family expectations. "About meeting Mom," Marcus finally said. "Where did she suggest?" "The botanical garden," Charlotte replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "Apparently she remembers taking you and Joshua there when you were children." The memory hit Marcus like a wave. Sunday afternoons, exploring the greenhouses, his mother patiently explaining the name of each flower, Joshua running between the trees. It was a fragment of a simpler time, before the weight of the Richardson empire began to suffocate his family. "I'll find her," he decided, surprising himself with the firmness in his own voice. "Marcus," Joshua began, concern evident in his tone. "Don't worry," Marcus interrupted him gently. "I'm not going back, but maybe Mom needs release as much as we do." Charlotte began organizing the documents, her precise movements masking a hesitation that Marcus didn't let go unnoticed. "I can accompany you if you wish. Professionally speaking, it would be prudent to have a witness." Their gazes met for a moment longer than necessary, and Marcus felt something change in the air between them. It was more than a simple attraction. It was a mutual recognition of shared values, of an understanding that went beyond the professional. "I appreciate that, Ms. Hayes," he replied, surprised by the softness in her voice. "But I think I need to do this alone." Joshua had approached the table again, his fingers drumming nervously on the investor's card. "When's the meeting?" "This afternoon at 3, Charlotte replied, turning her attention back to the documents. "Enough time for us to go over all the legal details first," Marcus watched as she explained each clause clearly and patiently, answering Joshua's occasional questions with genuine interest. There was something captivating about the way she combined professionalism with a natural kindness. The morning progressed as they worked, the autumn sun gradually warming the room. Between signings and legal discussions, Marcus found himself increasingly aware of Charlotte's presence, the light floral scent that surrounded her, the way she frowned slightly as she concentrated, the occasional glint of determination in her eyes. When they finally finished, it was almost noon. Joshua left first, eager to prepare his presentation for the investors. Marcus lingered, organizing his briefcase with deliberate slowness. "Miss Hayes," he began, turning to her by the door. "Charlotte, thank you not only for the legal work, but for everything." She smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face in a way that made Marcus' heart skip a beat. "Sometimes, Mr. Richardson, doing the right thing takes more than legal knowledge. It requires courage." "Marcus," he corrected softly. "Please call me Marcus." The moment between them stretched on, full of unspoken possibilities. Finally, Charlotte nodded, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "Good luck in the botanical garden, Marcus," she said, "and remember, some flowers need time to fully bloom." He left the office with the distinct feeling that it wasn't just his relationship with his mother that might blossom. That afternoon, the Boston Botanical Garden was particularly quiet. That fall afternoon, Marcus made his way along the cobblestone path, passing flower beds where the last flowers of the season were still bravely resisting. He found his mother exactly where she had suggested, next to the orchid greenhouse, his favorite place. For as long as he could remember, Patricia Richardson was sitting on a wooden bench, her elegant hands resting on an Hermes bag, when she saw her son approaching her. Face lit up with a hesitant smile, unlike the usual mask of composure she maintained in public. "You came," she said softly, gesturing for him to sit down. Marcus settled down next to her, noticing how his mother looked smaller, more fragile than he remembered. "This place hasn't changed much," he commented, watching a butterfly land on a nearby flower. "Do you remember that Sunday?" Patricia asked, her voice laden with nostalgia, "when Joshua insisted on knowing the scientific name of every plant? And you spent the whole afternoon consulting the plaques too?" "Answer all his questions," Marcus added, a genuine smile appearing on his lips. The silence that followed was filled only by the soft buzz of the nearby fountain and the occasional birdsong. Patricia fiddled nervously with her wedding ring, a habit Marcus recognized from his childhood. "I read the emails," she finally said, her voice trembling slightly. "After you left yesterday, I went into your father's office and read everything." Marcus felt his body tense, but remained silent, allowing his mother to continue. "I always knew your father was intense in his ambitions," she continued, "but to see it written down, to see how he planned to use Joshua," her voice faltered, and it took her a moment to pull herself together. "Why didn't you ever say anything, Mom?" Marcus asked softly. Patricia looked at the orchids through the glass of the greenhouse, their vibrant colors contrasting with the pallor of her face. "Because I believed I was protecting you, that keeping the family together, keeping up appearances was the most important thing, at the cost of Josh's happiness, mine." "No," she turned to face him, unshed tears glistening in her eyes, "at the cost of my own courage. Every time I saw Joshua dwindle, every time I noticed you distancing yourself, I told myself it was temporary, that one day everything would work out." Marcus thought of Charlotte, of how she had seen something in his mother that morning, that he himself was beginning to realize, a woman struggling to find her own voice after decades of silence. "I spoke to your lawyer this morning," Patricia continued, surprising Marcus. "Ms. Hayes, she asked me some questions that no one had ever asked me before." "What kind of questions?" "About what I wanted, not as Richard Richardson's wife, not as the mother of the heirs of Richardson Enterprises, but as Patricia." She let out a soft, almost incredulous laugh. "You know, I couldn't answer that." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He remembered how Charlotte had that unique ability to see beyond appearances, to ask the right questions at the right time. "It's not too late, Mom," he said, covering her hand with his, "for either of us." Patricia took a deep breath, her gaze wandering around the garden. "Your father won't take it easily. He's already mobilizing lawyers, counselors." "Let Charlotte, Miss Hayes, handle it," Marcus replied, noticing how her name came naturally from his lips. "She's more capable than her father realizes." A small smile appeared on Patricia's face. "Do you call her Charlotte when she's not around?" Marcus felt his cheeks heat up, taken aback by his mother's insight. "It's professional." "Of course," Patricia replied, and for a moment Marcus saw a glimpse of the mother of his childhood, the one who could read through his little lies with a single glance. "She reminds me a lot of myself when I was younger, you know, before she let her ambitions be stifled by someone else's dreams." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the surrounding trees, bringing with it the scent of the last roses in the garden. Marcus thought about how drastically his life had changed in just a few days, and how each change seemed to bring him closer to something real. "What are you going to do now?" he asked his mother. Patricia squared her shoulders, a gesture Marcus recognized as her preparation for decisive moments. "First, I'm going to support you and your brother." Then she paused, as if savoring the freedom of her next words. "I'm going to Rediscover who Patricia is. They sat there for a while longer talking about old memories and future possibilities. When they finally said goodbye, Marcus felt that something fundamental had changed, not just between him and his mother, but in the very fabric of his family. As he walked back to his car, his phone vibrated with a message from Charlotte. "How was the meeting?" Marcus paused for a moment, contemplating the answer. Finally, he typed, "Some flowers really need time to bloom. Can we talk about it over coffee?" The answer came almost immediately. "I know a great place near the office tomorrow, 8 a.m. Perfect." He replied, an involuntary smile appearing on his face. As he put the phone away, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the garden paths, and Marcus couldn't help thinking that sometimes the biggest changes started with the simplest gestures, like an honest conversation in a garden or a coffee promise for the next morning. Charlotte's chosen cafe was a small establishment on Beacon Hill with arched windows and old wooden tables. Marcus arrived a few minutes before 8, choosing a discreet table at the back. The aroma of freshly ground coffee filled the room, mingling with the smell of artisan breads coming out of the oven. Charlotte entered punctually, her loose hair framing her face in a way that made Marcus momentarily lose his breath. She was wearing a navy blue dress under a beige coat, a refreshing change from her usual corporate attire. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting," she said, taking a seat opposite him. "I've only just arrived," Marcus replied, noticing how the morning light highlighted the golden tones in her green eyes. "Joshua called me last night. The meeting with the investors was a success." Charlotte's face lit up. "I knew it would be. Your brother has a natural talent for innovation. All he needed was the right opportunity." A waitress approached to take their orders, a cappuccino for Charlotte and a black coffee for Marcus. There was a moment of comfortable silence between them, filled only by the soft sound of the coffee shop. "My mom mentioned that you two talked," Marcus began, watching as Charlotte absent-mindedly smoothed down the sleeve of her coat. "Yes," she nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Your mother is a fascinating woman." Marcus' years of conditioning have made her believe she has no choices, but there is an inner strength in her that is beginning to awaken. "How do you do it?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. "See beyond appearances make people open up." Charlotte smiled, a soft smile that made something inside Marcus stir. "Years working in corporate law have taught me that behind every contract, every negotiation, there are real people with complex stories. I've learned to listen not only to what they say, but also to what they don't say." Their orders arrived, and Charlotte thanked the waitress with genuine kindness. Marcus watched her add a precise amount of sugar to his cappuccino, her movements deliberate and graceful. "I got a call from the council this morning," he mentioned, swirling his coffee cup. "Apparently my father is trying to call an emergency meeting." "I know," Charlotte replied, surprising him. "I've already prepared a precautionary measure. Your father can't make any unilateral decisions while the transfer process is underway." Marcus felt a surge of admiration for her competence. "Do you always think of everything?" "It's my job to anticipate problems," she shrugged, but there was an amused twinkle in her eyes. "Besides, I've met a lot of Richard Richardson Sr. over the course of my career. Powerful men don't usually take kindly to losing control." "What about you?" Marcus asked, surprising himself with his boldness. "Do you always keep control?" A slight blush colored Charlotte's cheeks. "Not always," she admitted softly. "Sometimes the best things in life happen when we let go of control." The moment between them intensified, full of unspoken possibilities. Soft jazz music played in the background, creating an almost cinematic atmosphere. "There's an Italian restaurant in the North End." Marcus began, his heart racing slightly. "Dinner tonight." Charlotte studied him for a moment, as if carefully weighing up her answer. "Would that be appropriate, considering I'm still representing your interests legally?" "Probably not," he admitted with a small smile, "but some rules are worth breaking." She took a sip of her cappuccino, leaving him in suspense for a few seconds. 8 hours. 8 o'clock, he confirmed, feeling a wave of anticipation. The rest of breakfast passed in easy conversation, alternating between professional and personal matters. Marcus discovered that Charlotte had grown up in Seattle, loved classic literature, and had a cat called Fitzgerald. When they finally got up to leave, their hands brushed lightly as they reached for their coats. The contact, although brief, sent an electric current through Marcus. "I'll see you tonight," Charlotte said softly, adjusting her bag. On her shoulder, "Charlotte," Marcus called when she was already at the door. She turned the morning light, creating a golden halo around her. "Thank you for everything." She smiled, that smile that was fast becoming his favorite sight. "It's not over yet, Marcus. Some stories are just beginning." As he watched her leave down the busy street of Beacon Hill, Marcus realized that his life had been transformed in ways he had never imagined possible. In less than a week, he had defied his father, reconnected with his brother, rediscovered his mother, and now met someone who made him question everything he thought he knew about true connections. His phone vibrated with a message from Joshua. "How was breakfast with the competent Ms. Hayes?" Marcus laughed, typing back, "I'll tell you later, dinner tonight." The reply was immediate. "Finally, it's about time you broke some rules." Putting his phone away, Marcus walked to his car feeling lighter than he had in years. The fall morning in Boston seemed brighter, more full of possibilities. Sometimes, he reflected, you have to lose something valuable to find something priceless. And as he drove to his temporary office, his thoughts were already wandering to dinner that evening, to conversations not yet begun and moments not yet lived. The price of truth might be high, but the rewards he was discovering were infinitely more valuable. The Italian restaurant in North End was exactly as Marcus remembered, it cozy and intimate with candles flickering on white linen. Tablecloths sitting at a table at the back. He nervously adjusted his napkin for the third time in 5 minutes, his eyes fixed on the entrance door. Charlotte arrived punctually at 8, wearing a black dress that felt perfectly to her curves. Her hair was loose in soft waves, and Marcus noticed that she had swapped her usual glasses for contact lenses, further revealing the intensity of her green eyes. "This place is lovely," she commented as Marcus pulled out his chair. "I've been coming to the North End for years and never discovered it. It's one of Boston's best-kept secrets," he replied, taking a seat opposite her. "I discovered it by chance when Joshua was at college. We used to come here when he needed to escape the pressure." A sommelier approached with the wine list, and Marcus noticed how Charlotte studied the options with the same care she devoted to legal documents. The Brunello di Montalcino, 2015. She decided, surprising both the sommelier and Marcus with her knowledgeable choice. "Impressive," Marcus commented after the sommelier walked away. "I didn't know you were a wine connoisseur." "There are many things you don't know about me, Mr. Richardson," she replied with a provocative smile that made his heart race. The conversation flowed naturally as they shared a starter of burrata with heirloom tomatoes. Charlotte talked about her years at Stanford Law School, where she developed a passion for defending causes she believed in. Marcus shared stories from his childhood, including the pranks he and Joshua pulled in the halls of Richardson Enterprises. "I got an interesting call this afternoon," Charlotte mentioned as they sipped their wine. "From your mother." Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. "What did she want?" "Legal advice." Charlotte paused as if carefully choosing her next words. "About separation of assets." The revelation hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. "She's considering divorcing your father." "Yes," Charlotte confirmed softly. "She said that your conversation in the botanical garden made her realize that it's never too late to start over." Marcus processed the information as their main courses arrived. Tagliatelle al tartufo for Charlotte and osso buco for him. The rich aroma of truffles mingled with her soft perfume, creating a sensory experience he knew he would remember forever. "As a lawyer," Charlotte continued, "I should warn you that this could further complicate our legal situation with Richardson Enterprises." "And how, Charlotte?" he asked, his eyes meeting hers across the table. She hesitated for a moment, putting down her fork. "Like Charlotte, I'm proud of your mother for finally choosing her own happiness, and impressed by the son who helped her find that courage." The moment between them intensified, charged with unspoken emotion. The candlelight danced across Charlotte's face, softening her already naturally graceful features. "You know," Marcus began, refilling their wine glasses, "when I hired you, I expected to find just a competent lawyer, someone who could navigate the legal complexities of challenging my father. And instead, I found someone who sees beyond contracts and clauses, someone who understands that some battles are about much more than money or power." Charlotte reached across the table, her fingers lightly brushing as the touch those subtle sent waves of electricity through her body. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice softer. "After this case is over, I'm planning to open my own office, focused on helping people break free from toxic situations, whether in family businesses or personal relationships." "Charlotte, that's amazing." Marcus smiled, genuinely happy for her, and she continued, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I was wondering if you'd like to be my first unofficial client to help other people who are going through what you and your family have faced." The proposal took him by surprise, but it made perfect sense. Using his experience and resources to help others find their own truth, it was a way of giving meaning to all the turmoil his family was going through. The rest of the dinner passed in a mixture of future planning and moments of deeper connection. When they finally left the restaurant, the Boston night was clear and starry, a rarity for that time of year. "Can I walk you home?" Marcus offered, not wanting the evening to end. "Actually," Charlotte smiled, her eyes sparkling under the streetlights, "I know a place nearby with the best tiramisu dessert in town if you're not in a hurry." "For you." Marcus entwined his fingers in hers, amazed at how perfectly they fit together. I have all the time in the world as they walked along the cobbled street to the north, and Marcus realized that he was experiencing one of those pivotal moments in life when a seemingly difficult decision paves the way for something extraordinarily beautiful. "You know what's funny," Charlotte commented as they turned a corner. "When I took on your case, I thought I was just helping someone free themselves from family ties. And you ended up freeing yourself too. Let's just say I learned that some rules are there to be broken," she replied, squeezing his hand lightly, "especially when the prize is worth more than the risk." The evening was just beginning, and with it a new page in their lives was being written, a page where truth and love intertwined in unexpected and wonderful ways. The news of Patricia and Richard Richardson Sr.'s impending divorce exploded like a bomb in Boston business circles. Marcus watched through the window of his new office as the first snowflakes of December danced in the air, marking the beginning of winter and symbolically a new era for his family. "I've just received the final documents," Charlotte announced, entering the room with a folder in hand. Over the last few weeks, she had become a constant presence in his life, far beyond his lawyer. "Your father has finally signed the transfer of shares." Marcus turned to face her, noticing how particularly beautiful she looked that morning, wearing a dark red ensemble that contrasted perfectly with the snow outside. How was he surprisingly resigned? Charlotte replied, stepping closer. "I think your mother's decision was the final blow to his illusions of control." The office, located in a renovated historic building in Cambridge, was Marcus' first investment in his new venture, a consultancy specializing in helping family businesses implement more ethical and sustainable practices. The space next door was being prepared for Charlotte's future law firm. Joshua called earlier, Marcus commented, taking the folder from her hands, their fingers brushing in the process. "The renewable energy prototype is entering the testing phase. The investors are optimistic." "Of course they are," Charlotte smiled, leaning on the table. "Your brother is brilliant when free to be himself." Marcus opened the folder, but his eyes were drawn to the delicate sapphire ring on Charlotte's finger, a gift he had given her the night before during an intimate dinner in his apartment. The jewel caught the light of the winter sun, casting little rainbows across the room. "Mom wants to have us over for dinner this weekend," he mentioned, closing the folder. "She bought that house on Beacon Hill that she's always dreamed of restoring." "Patricia is flourishing," Charlotte observed, her green eyes shining with genuine admiration. "Yesterday I met her in the cafe, discussing restoration projects with an architect. She seemed alive." Marcus moved closer to Charlotte, resting his hands on her waist. Over the last few months their relationship had developed as naturally as the seasons change, gradually but inevitably. "You know what's ironic?" he reflected as she absent-mindedly adjusted his tie. "Dad always said that family was everything, but it's only after we defy his control that we really become a family. Sometimes we need to lose something to find something better." Charlotte replied, her words echoing a truth they had both discovered together. The phone on the table rang, and Charlotte reached for it, still in Marcus' arms. "Mr. Richardson's office?" "Yes, Joshua, he's here." She passed the phone to Marcus with a knowing smile. "Josh, what's up?" Marcus answered, noticing the excitement in his brother's voice. "Marcus, the initial tests worked. The system is generating 40% more energy than expected." Joshua could barely contain his enthusiasm. "That's incredible," Marcus exclaimed, sharing a meaningful look with Charlotte. "We need to celebrate. How about that Italian restaurant in North End?" "Perfect. Charlotte's coming too, right? I need her opinion on some of the patent's legal issues." "Of course she's coming," Marcus replied, winking at her. At 8, after hanging up, Marcus pulled Charlotte closer. "Do you remember the first time we went to that restaurant?" "How could I forget?" She smiled, tracing the outline of his face with her fingers. "That's when I realized that I had broken the most important rule of corporate law. Don't fall in love with the client." "Exactly," she laughed softly. "But some rules are there to be broken, aren't they?" A soft knock on the door interrupted them. It was Patricia, elegant in a camel coat, her eyes shining with a long-lost vitality. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she smiled, watching the couple with evident approval. "I just came by to show you the plans for the house," and she hesitated briefly. "Richard called this morning." Marcus felt Charlotte squeeze his hand in silent support. "What did he want to talk?" Patricia replied, taking a seat in one of the armchairs. "He said he's been in therapy. He wants to try to understand where he went wrong." "And how do you feel about that?" Charlotte asked gently, her empathetic nature showing. "Honestly proud," Patricia smiled. "Not of him necessarily, but of all of us, of how we found the courage to choose the truth even when it was difficult." The snow continued to fall outside, covering Cambridge in a white blanket that seemed to purify everything it touched. Marcus watched as the natural light transformed the office into an almost ethereal space, reflecting off the polished surfaces and creating soft shadows. So dinner in the North End tonight, Patricia asked, standing up. Joshua told me about the success of the tests. At 8, Charlotte confirmed, let's celebrate not only Joshua's success, but all new beginnings. After Patricia left, Marcus and Charlotte remained in each other's arms, watching the snow through the window. The sapphire ring sparkled on her finger, a silent promise of a future built on truth and love. You know what I think sometimes, Marcus murmured against her hair, about how a seemingly difficult decision can lead to something so perfectly right. Charlotte turned in his arms, her green eyes meeting his, like giving up $1 billion inheritance and ending up finding something much more valuable. Exactly. He smiled, leaning in to kiss her softly. The kiss was interrupted by the sound of the phone, more clients needing help to find their own way through familiar corporate labyrinths, but now with Charlotte by his side and his family stronger than ever. Marcus knew he had discovered true wealth, the kind that no inheritance could buy. The snow continued to fall, marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. And while Charlotte answered the phone with her usual professional efficiency, Marcus thought about how the price of truth, though high, had brought him the greatest treasure of all, the freedom to love and be truly loved.